Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health explains why not everyone will be able to visit friends and family in long-term care facilities. With Albertans voting that equalization needs to be reformed, we hear from Premier KENNEY about what the next steps will be. And we also hear from Medicine Hat's first female mayor, the newly elected LYNDSAY Clark, will talk about plans for her city moving forward.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says Albertans who are not fully vaccinated should not be visiting friends or relatives in long-term care facilities. Hinshaw says she will be sending out a letter with more details and says this step is necessary to protect our most vulnerable.
I know this will impact residents in different ways, but it is very important to help protect residents and staff from COVID-19. Fully vaccinated Albertans who have no signs of illness can continue to see their loved ones who are residents in these facilities as often as they wish. While this is a recommendation, in the letter I will also reinforce that operators have the authority to implement additional mandatory measures in their facilities as appropriate in consultation with their residents and families.
Fresh off of the heels of the municipal election is a strong message from Albertans that equalization needs to be reformed. How will this impact things moving forward remains to be seen. Premier Jason Kenney says equalization needs a better formula to give us a better deal. He says he was satisfied with the results of the recent referendum, which shows the majority of Albertans want to see a change.
I understand that based on the current preliminary results, it's about around 60% having voted yes, but we do want to wait until all of the votes are counted before commenting further. If we do see that endorsement of the referendum, we would then move forward with a motion in the legislature when it resumes later this month to ratify this request for a constitutional amendment, and then of course move forward with Ottawa on those negotiations.
Political reporter Brian Lilly says if the Trudeau Liberals do not take the referendum vote on equalization seriously, it could further deepen the divide between Alberta and Ottawa.
Failure to consider this seriously will only foster Western alienation and the rise of parties that want to say, you know what, it's time for Alberta or Alberta and Saskatchewan or Buffalo or whatever you want to call it to say enough is enough, let's separate.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss how the Trudeau Liberals are sending a mixed message when it comes to travel for Canadians. He'll have more details for us coming up in the second half of our program. The Federal Conservative Party of Canada does not agree with the committee's decision to ban unvaccinated people from Parliament. The Liberals, NDP, and Bloc Québécois are all in favor of a ruling that would only allow people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 be allowed to enter the House of Commons. A recent report by the Canadian Press says 79 out of 118 Tory MPs are now fully vaccinated. That raises questions about whether the rest can take their seats in the House when Parliament resumes late next month. Premier Jason Kenney says a Calgary City Councillor should resign if allegations of sexual impropriety are true. Sean Chu was re-elected on Monday in the municipal vote. Chu was never charged with a criminal offence. He was, however, found guilty of discreditable conduct by the Law Enforcement Review Board for touching a 16-year-old girl's leg when he worked as a Calgary police officer in 1997. A newcomer to politics has won a large victory in the Medicine Hat municipal election. LYNDSAY Clark claimed the mayoral seat on Monday night, beating incumbent Ted Clugston in a landslide victory. Clark won with over 13,000 votes compared with 4,600 for Clugston. Clark is a lawyer with the city's solicitor department. She took an unpaid leave of absence while running to become mayor. Clark says she decided to run for the city's top job because she saw Medicine Hat's values and priorities in the past few years starting to drift away from where they once were.
It's critical for council to, be transparent with each other, make sure that we're retaining those positive conflict relationships, and of course, that's going to translate to how we interact with the public and with staff as well. That openness and respect for the people that we're communicating with, and always being open. Part of that openness is making sure that we are also open when other people don't necessarily agree with our positions.
Clark is also Medicine Hat's first female mayor. The official results of the election will be declared on Friday. Now, another female candidate was elected mayor in Alberta, and this time in the town of Colehurst. LINNSIE MONTINA won the mayoral chair on Monday night. She beat out former City Councillor Ron Lagmet in a close race. MONTINA claimed 398 votes, whereas Lagmet only earned 259. MONTINA says she was ecstatic when she heard the news on Monday night. She adds that one of the biggest challenges will be working with the new council.
Obviously, I'm new, and 3 of the 4 councillor candidates are new. Or I guess now we're no longer candidates. We're actually going to be in there. So some of the councillors are new, and I think for us it'll be that large learning curve. It's also bringing a group of people together and really building team. And so I think that that's a big thing. And so I'm really excited though to start that process and to get everyone kind of on the same page so that we can start doing the work that we've set out to do.
The town says out of approximately 2,000 eligible voters, close to 700 people cast their ballots. On Tuesday, we introduced you to 4 newly elected Lethbridge City Councillors. Now today, we'll show you the 4 who are returning. The group will begin their time in office beginning on Monday. As Carson Marsouk reports now, the returnees say there's a lot of work to be done, including working collaboratively to help Lethbridge move forward.
4 returning city councillors have been re-elected to serve Lethbridge. Belinda CROWSON, Mark Campbell, Jeff Carlson, and Ryan Parker will all sit around council chambers once again. Last council saw diverse opinions between councillors, but Councillor Belinda CROWSON, who will be starting her 2nd term, says she hopes the new orientation package that the governance committee brought forward will benefit all members before meetings get underway.
There are projects being done to help the entire new council work together on strategic planning. So that'll give us all an opportunity to get to know each other, but also to come to a consensus about what we all want to work on together over the next 4 years. So the orientation process is where you get to bring in all your ideas and then see how they blend with everyone else's and come up with the best ideas for the community.
The 4 returning councillors all agree that listening to the community will drive the council in the right direction over the next 4 years. Ryan Parker placed 4th in the polls and will be serving his 8th term on council. Parker will also be the youngest member on council, which he hopes to bring that perspective to council chambers.
I bring a perspective of having a young family, and I think that's valuable in our community because we have a lot of young families, but I try to represent the whole community the best I can.
CROWSON says although campaigning is done, councillors are still looking to interact and hear the public's concerns and answer any questions they may have during their time in office.
Reach out to us throughout the 4 years of the term. If you have ideas, things we're missing, please continue the conversation with us. If there's a voice that you don't think is being represented, we need you to come and talk to us and to sit down with us and make sure that we are representing the entire community of Lethbridge.
Councillor Campbell will be starting his 2nd term on council, with Jeff Carlson entering his 6th term. The group will be sworn in on Monday. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Country musician Corb Lund, along with artists from Alberta's country music spectrum, have released a song many are calling an anthem against proposed coal development in Alberta's Rocky Mountains. The song, which is a re-release of Lund's This Is My Prairie, is a collaboration that includes artists like Brett Kissel, Terry Clark, Paul Brandt, and a few others. Lund says that he and his fellow musicians have released the song to express opposition and bring awareness to coal mining, which he says is a threat to our water supply.
The purpose of the song at this point in time is to give voice to the vast majority of Albertans who are against coal mining in the Rockies. And there's been a bunch of polling on this, and the numbers keep getting higher and higher. It seems like, I think last year it was something like 70%, and now it's higher than that from the latest polls I've heard. So clearly the government needs to listen to us on this, because the only people benefiting from this are foreign coal companies and possibly the government and a handful of jobs in mining towns. And I have sympathy for the people in mining towns, but you know, Crow's Nest Pass people who are pro coal have been going after me pretty hard. And it's very selfish in my opinion, because we're hearing about a few hundred jobs per mine, but there's 100,000 people in Lethbridge who drink directly out of the Old Man River, and that's our water, and we don't want to contaminate it. And almost every coal mine contaminates the water with selenium. There's studies on this. They don't know how to get rid of it. And I'm sorry about your jobs, but we have to drink the water.
Any proceeds from the song's release will raise funds for landowner groups who are standing in opposition to coal development in the Alberta Rockies. The appetite for Alberta-produced goods and resources continues to grow around the world. But with this growth comes additional challenges to meet the demand. Aaron Crane from Economic Development Lethbridge explains how the ag industry of southern Alberta is growing and how technology is helping to meet those needs.
It's happening everywhere, right? One of the things that we've done in the past is we've put on some sessions around automation in supply chain to take, or maybe not to take advantage of, but to address some of those challenges that businesses are having, right? There's a lot of emerging technology out there, and Southern Alberta and Lethbridge are really good about addressing some of that. Again, going back to the post-secondaries, to the training providers that are in the area. That's a lot of the work that we do is around emerging technology, things like automation, robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence. It all plays a big role, and businesses should be looking at it in order to meet those challenges.
The latest census says there are now over 70,000 working farmers here in Alberta. 4 authors in our city have constructed a new picture book chronicling the history of Lethbridge. As Micah Quinn explains now, this new initiative features hundreds of pictures, took around a year to complete.
Lethbridge, a history in pictures.
There are more than 130 photographs encompassing the broad history of our city in the book entitled Lethbridge, a History in Pictures. The book was co-authored by Lorian Johansson, Belinda CROWSON, George KUHL, and Bobby Fox, who are all members of the Lethbridge Historical Society.
And we happen to have a lot of these pictures either through the museum archives or in our own archives. And it makes a great gift, so we thought we would put something together that told our story visually. Some books can be especially history books, can be very text heavy. They're not necessarily the easiest read, but this tells our story in a way that everybody can enjoy, right from very young children all the way up to people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and beyond. So this is something for everyone, and we wanted to make sure that Lethbridge could tell its story in a way that everyone can digest and enjoy.
Before it was a popular place for a bite to eat, the Water Tower and Grill restaurant originally started as a water supply in the 1950s.
Then it was decommissioned in 1999 and converted into the restaurant and bar that we know and love today.
George KUHL, one of the co-authors of the book, says it took about a year to complete.
You know, the final draft was ready, I think, in June, if I'm not mistaken. And so basically the summer and early fall gave them time to get the printing and distribution in order.
You can purchase the Lethbridge A History in Pictures book at local bookstores and by visiting ilovebooks.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
There is a shortage of driver trainers and instructors here in Lethbridge. That's according to the Alberta Motor Association. This week marks the AMA's Small Business Week, and the group is using the shortage as a way to bring the opportunity to aspiring entrepreneurs who want to enjoy the safety net of a larger contracted partner. Company officials say the shortage is being caused by the pandemic and drivers retiring. Manager of AMA Driver Education, Ryan Lamont, says they usually get around 10,000 students through their doors each and every year with the need for more instructors. He says this is a great business opportunity.
For anybody that's looking to start up their own business, having more than 10,000 students a year going through AMA Driver Education, it's really fertile ground for anybody who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur and to get up and running quickly. So having these students available for those instructors, it's really a great opportunity for anybody looking to start their own business.
A driver education instructor can earn as much as $70,000 a year. And if you'd like more information, visit the AMA's website. BC Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says COVID-19 capacity limits for indoor and outdoor organized events will be lifted on October the 25th. That is the day after the deadline for residents to be fully vaccinated if they want to attend certain venues. Anyone who is 12 and older will need to present their vaccine card to attend events, and mask mandates will remain in place.
We'll be able to increase to 100 capacity at indoor sporting events, indoor concerts, theaters, movie theaters, dance and symphony events, and some of the great arts and sports that we've been missing, as well as indoor organized events such as weddings, funeral receptions, and parties. I will, as well, we're going to be lifting that restriction, the requirement that everybody be seated at restaurants and pubs to allow a little bit more freedom of movement with the fact that everybody in those situations will be fully vaccinated.
When it comes to celebrating her birthday, a Saskatoon woman really likes to dive in. Lara Guerrero turned 51 this summer. Now, to mark the occasion, she swam in 51 different lakes in Saskatchewan. Guerrero says some of her favorites included Zeaden Lake in Narrow Hills Provincial Park and Diefenbaker Lake. She says the best swimming lakes have clear water and sandy bottoms. It's amazing to see. A new study shows Manitoba doctors are increasingly prescribing antibiotics for conditions that may not need medication. The University of Manitoba study also says doctors too often prescribe the wrong antibiotics when they're needed. It looked at antibiotics dispensed at pharmacies between 2011 and 2016 and found that 73% of patients being treated for chest colds were unnecessarily prescribed the drugs. The study also found the rate of unnecessary antibiotic prescribing increased for asthma, coughs, and allergy-related symptoms. Surgeons recently attached a pig's kidney to a human body and watched it begin to work. Health experts say that's a small step in the decades-long quest to one day use animal organs for life-saving transplants. We have more now in this report.
Scientists have taken a small but important step in the quest to one day use animal organs for human transplant. In this unique experiment, Dr. Robert Montgomery and a team attached a genetically engineered pig kidney to a pair of large blood vessels from the leg of a human body.
For the 54 hours that we conducted the study, the kidney functioned perfectly, just like you would expect a living donor human kidney to function.
The test involved a recently deceased woman. Her family agreed after knowing her wish to contribute to science. The gene-edited pig was engineered to eliminate sugar in its cells that causes organ rejection.
I think it sets the stage for more work to be done over the coming years, but it really tells us that we're on the right path and that success is in the near future, not in a matter of decades as it was in the past.
With more than 90,000 Americans needing a kidney donation, pig-to-human transplants could address the organ shortage.
Right now we're in a crisis of organ availability. So almost half the people who are waiting for a organ transplant either get too ill or die before they receive one.
But some ethical questions remain.
What it means, yes, to basically develop organs in pigs, which is going to be meaning that you have to produce lots of baby pigs.
Montgomery, a heart transplant recipient himself, says the next step is to do studies in living people.
I went through that period of time when I was waiting and not knowing whether an organ was going to arrive in time. So I think it will accelerate that process. And I think it's close. It's a year or two away.
Giving new hope to those in need of a life-saving transplant. Kathy Young, Associated Press.
The death toll from flooding in a northern state in India has risen now to 46. Officials say rescuers worked throughout the night retrieving bodies stuck in debris and had to evacuate some of those in the most vulnerable areas. It had been raining for 3 days, flooding roads, destroying bridges and homes, and causing massive landslides. Flooding in other regions of the country also claimed 39 lives. Officials warn that more heavy downpours are in the upcoming forecast. While no rain in our region, we had another beautiful but cooler day here in Lethbridge, and the sunshine will be sticking around. We should, in fact, see a few degrees warmer in the coming days. Full weather details are coming up. We experienced some pretty nice temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta so far this week, and that trend should continue. Jeanette Rocher is back with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it was almost warm enough today to enjoy an outdoor picnic.
Yeah, well, if you liked today's weather, then it's going to get even warmer. You're going to be even happier with the forecast. We've got those high winds, 30 to 50K winds coming in this evening. They're going to stick around tomorrow, but the temperature is going to get above a seasonal average, which is nice. 15 degrees the high on Thursday with lots of sunshine. Look at that, though, for Friday, 18 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. 16 on Saturday, 15 Sunday, back to 16 on Monday, and 14 on a Tuesday with partly cloudy skies. So we're going to be hovering in those teens. Average high for this time of year, 13. So we're going to be above that this week. So that's great news. Average low for this time of year, -1. 26 was where we were at back in 1940. That was our warmest day on record. Our chilliest was -11. That was back in 1984. Sun rose this morning at 8:01 a.m. and 6:31 is when the sun will be setting tonight. So 10.5 hours of daylight. Over on the west West Coast tomorrow, we're seeing some showers, particularly later on in the day. In the beginning of the day, looking at mix of sun and cloud, those showers coming in later on, and high winds by the water as well. 16 the high for both Victoria and Vancouver. 12 in Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow with sunny skies. Not too bad with the wind either. The prairie staying pretty even with the sunshine too. Look at that sun in Saskatoon, high of 9. Regina 9 as well, and 6 degrees in Winnipeg. So we are seeing those single-digit temperatures in the rest of the prairies, staying a little bit warmer out here in Alberta. Over there, they're a little bit lower than seasonal average. 18 the high, though, for Toronto. They're seeing showers tomorrow with a risk of a thunderstorm there. 15 the high in Ottawa, showers as well. Chance of showers tomorrow as well in Montreal with a high of 15 degrees. Looking to the east coast, Fredericton, mix of sun and cloud, 14 the high, 15 the high in Halifax, 13 for Charlottetown, and chance of showers there, periods of rain in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 10 degrees. So there you go. That is your forecast.
Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says today's inflation report shows the damage Justin Trudeau has inflicted on the Canadian economy. Stats Canada's reporting the inflation rate rose 4.4% in September. That's the highest level since 2003. O'Toole says everything from gas to groceries and housing is more expensive under Prime Minister Trudeau's watch, and he wants Parliament to start sitting earlier rather than late next month. A report by RBC Economics says it will take around $2 trillion to put the economy on a path of net zero emissions in 30 years. But it says achieving the goal is possible despite the high price tag. The report suggests governments, businesses, and communities will need to spend at least $60 billion a year to cut emissions by 75% from current levels. CP Rail is reporting a lower profit in its third quarter, but says revenue increased by 4%. The Calgary-based railway earned $472 million. That is down from $598 million a year ago. Revenue rose to $1.94 billion. CP Rail is forecasting low single-digit volume growth this year, down from its July outlook for high single-digit growth. Canadian National Railway's embattled CEO is retiring in the new year. The announcement comes as the Montreal-based railway reported earning $1.68 billion in the third quarter. That is up from $985 million a year earlier. The big jump in profits is due in part to a $770 million U.S. tax break fee after walking away from a takeover bid for Kansas City Southern Railway. CN says its CEO, Jean-Jacques Rouet, will leave at the end of January or when a successor has been appointed. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 101 points in the day to finish at 21,188. The Dow was up 152 points to 35,609. The S&P 500 was up 16 points to 4536, and the Nasdaq was down 7 points to 15,121. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 91 cents to 83.87 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to 5.17 US. Gold was up 3 cents to 17.82.11 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.29 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.43 per bushel, barley's at $9.14, canola's at $21.42, and corn is at $9.77 per bushel. Live cattle were up 95 cents to 125.95, feeder cattle were up 83 cents to 155.93, and lean hogs were down $1.38 to 76.03. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 81.21 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says a Calgary City Councillor should resign if allegations of sexual impropriety are true. Sean Chu was re-elected on Monday in the municipal vote. Chu was never charged with a criminal offense. He was, however, found guilty of discreditable conduct by the Law Enforcement Review Board for touching a 16-year-old girl's leg when he worked as a Calgary police officer back in 1997. The Trudeau Liberals need to listen to Albertans when it comes to reforming equalization. That's according to political reporter Brian Lilly, who will explain why in just a moment. Albertans overwhelmingly voted to reform equalization. Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says this year alone, a family of four in our province paid around $2,600 in equalization payments. Many of us have had enough, especially with so many Alberta families struggling. Brian Lilly is a political reporter and a columnist for the Toronto Sun, and he joins me right now. Now, Brian, even though Albertans voted overwhelmingly to see equalization reformed, will the Trudeau Liberals even care when Premier Jason Kenney presents the findings to Trudeau?
Based on their past statements and their past actions, I would have to say the answer would probably be no. When Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been asked about this in the past, he has simply said, look, Jason Kenney was at the cabinet table the last time this was renegotiated, and he voted in favor of the current formula. Well, the current formula may have worked for Alberta back in, when was the last time this was done? Around 2009, 2010? But it may not work for the province now. Justin Trudeau, though, doesn't seem to care. Sure, he's picked up a couple of seats in Alberta. Is that enough to make him care about the province? Probably not. Hal, there was another issue that came up over the last week where the Elections Canada said, based on population, Alberta should get 3 new seats, British Columbia 1 additional seat in the House of Commons, Ontario an extra seat, but Quebec should lose a seat in the House of Commons based on population and seat redistribution, based on a formula. Quebec has said, no, we won't accept that. The Bloc has said, no, we won't accept that. The Trudeau Liberals are more likely to listen to the Bloc and the province of Quebec and say, no, you won't lose your extra seat, than they are to say, well, okay, we'll give Alberta what it wants when it comes to equalization. That's the sad reality of the situation in the province. And but I have to warn you, I don't have to warn you, but I should warn the government that failure to consider this seriously will only foster Western alienation and the rise of parties that want to say, you know what, it's time for Alberta or Alberta and Saskatchewan or Buffalo or whatever you want to call it, to say enough is enough, let's separate.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives parties like the Maverick Party that much more power, when it comes to the popular vote here in our province. Now, Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently visited and paid respects to the many who lost their lives at the residential school site in Kamloops, BC. Our PM called the visit a true learning experience.
Well, unfortunately, it should have been a learning experience on September 30th. Of course, he was asked twice to go and visit Kamloops, which was, not the only residential school where we knew that there were grave sites. The fact that there were grave sites was all reported in the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission back in 2016. But this was the first one where they went through using the radar technology and said, okay, we've located the grave sites. We believe that we found them, and this is an issue. So they invited him on this first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a national day of mourning, of commemoration, a holiday, I hate using that term, to say you should be here. And he didn't respond. Instead, he flew past them and went to Tofino. He went on a beach vacation. I have to tell you, the dressing down that he received from Chief Roseanne Casimir was incredible to watch. The problem is that at the end, Trudeau said, well, this is a learning experience for us all. No, it was a learning experience for you. Sure, as a country, we can always do better, Hal, but the idea that every time Justin Trudeau makes a mistake, that we all have to have a learning experience, I'm sorry. No, he does. The rest of us can do better, sure, but he made the mistake. It's his learning experience. It was his comeuppance. He took it in some respects, didn't in others.
It appears as though the Trudeau Liberals continue to issue confusing messaging on travel. Why was Health Minister Patty Hajdu warning against travel just after Trudeau's trip to Tofino, BC, and then just after the election, and then apparently promoting a surfing competition with international competitors and her riding?
Yeah, well, imagine that, Hal, surfing in her riding. Now, if you don't know where Patty Hajdu's riding is, she represents Thunder Bay, Ontario, the northern tip in Canada of Lake Superior. And there was a Great Lakes surfing competition in her riding. And just a week after saying that not only should we avoid non-essential international travel, but that warning Canadians in a television interview that, you know what, traveling within the country, well, you can spread COVID from one community to another, and it's dangerous. She's out there promoting this this surfing competition, which promotes that it draws surfers from across North America. I mean, these guys can't get their act together. We have an election at the start of a fourth wave where the fact of, COVID-19 still being an issue is driven home by the Liberals on a daily basis. And yet they travel the country, they hold rallies that don't respect local COVID-19 regulations in terms of capacity size limits for events. They do all of these things, and then they turn around and they tell us, hey, don't you travel. Don't go south for the winter. Don't go visit your family. That's dangerous. It's a very confusing message. And I get why people look at the government messaging and say, I'm not going to listen to them anymore because they don't believe their own hype. That's dangerous. If it's as dangerous as they say, COVID-19, and in some places it is, and in some places it's not, it really does depend on your local situation, well then the government messaging and their actions should match that. Currently, that isn't the case, and that's a real problem.
Brian, let's talk about the land border to the United States reopening to fully vaccinated Canadians. Even if you're fully vaccinated, however, you'll still need a negative COVID-19 test before you can re-enter Canada. That's kind of interesting. Also, why did it take the Biden administration so long to reopen the border, Brian?
Well, to answer the last part of the question about why did it take so long, I think it's because Canada doesn't have the gravitas that it once did in Washington. There was a time under both conservative and liberal governments where prime minister could call a president and sort problems out. That's not the case. I know that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama both endorsed Justin Trudeau, but he doesn't really seem to have a relationship with Joe Biden. He didn't really have a good relationship with Donald Trump before him. And despite the bromance, there was nothing positive that came out of the relationship other than some photo ops with Barack Obama. So Justin Trudeau is what some people might call all hat, no cattle. He's going to look good, but he's not going to get anything done. And that's the problem on the border. Now, as for the reopening, here's the thing, Hal. If you are not vaccinated, you've still been able to fly into the United States up until now. But when they reopen the land border, that's going to change as well. Canadians flying in will have to be fully vaccinated to, if you want to visit your property in Florida, in California, in Arizona, in Texas, you're going to have to be fully vaccinated. And you'll have to show that negative test. Now, if you're flying in, you'll need a negative test to get into the United States and a negative test to come back into Canada. Driving, you won't need that. So, however you're traveling down, make sure that if you are headed south, and I can tell you, I think my mother started packing the car the night that the news broke, make sure that you know what the rules are for how you're traveling, where you're crossing the border, and what the rules will be when you get there. Because just like our rules vary province by province, their rules vary state by state. So if you're heading to Palm Springs, it's going to be a different set of rules than if you're heading to Phoenix or to somewhere in West Texas.
Brian, another cross-border issue is brewing, the push for Buy American provisions. Some would call it protectionism. Now, this could potentially cut Canada out of future auto industry investment here in North America?
Yeah, just like the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline was in many ways a protectionist measure under both Obama and the Biden administrations, so too is this move to say, you know what, we want to move auto manufacturing, auto facilities back into the United States. And so the Biden administration is pushing forward with a budget bill called the Build Back Better Act. Now, just like in Canada, spending bills have to originate in the lower house. So they originate in Congress, but it's sponsored by a Democrat out of Kentucky. And it includes in their almost 2,500 pages, it includes a provision that says you will get up to $12,500 back if you buy an electric vehicle, as long as most of the parts in that vehicle are made in the United States and the battery is made in the United States. Now, that's important because Ontario is in the middle of pushing to be a electric vehicle battery manufacturing hub. Inside Canada and mostly inside Ontario, we've got all the raw components. We've got the lithium, we've got the cobalt, the mining operations are here to get the raw materials, and there's a strong auto manufacturing sector here. But the United States wants to make sure that all those jobs end up down south. So if you follow US politics, you know that back in 2009, before the bailout was fully announced, Biden tried this back then. He tried to team up with the United Auto Workers to move all of the auto jobs in North America into the United States. And it was only because the Harper government at the time and the McGuinty government here in Ontario ponied up some cash that we kept any auto manufacturing jobs in this country. Joe Biden is an extreme protectionist. If you thought Donald Trump was bad on protectionism, and whether you loved Donald Trump or hated him, the man wanted jobs in America. Joe Biden is even worse when it comes to protectionist policies, and yet Canadians love him. He is going to hurt this country's economy in every single sector where we rely on access to American or international markets.
Let's also talk about pipelines, if you want to talk about the Biden administration and Canadian pipelines. Brian, Ottawa's unveiled its mandatory vaccination policy, and despite the tough rhetoric from the Prime Minister, you say this policy is a mess with a lot of holes in it. Can you explain?
Well, I mean, if you listen to Justin Trudeau during the election, he was the only person that could protect Canadians from COVID, because anybody else, I mean, they're going to allow testing. How? They're going to not make sure every single civil servant is vaccinated. And if that doesn't happen, we'll all get COVID and we'll all die. I mean, that was kind of the message that Justin Trudeau was pushing. It was a very alarmist message. And then when you look at his actual policy, okay, well, despite the fact that he says exemptions will be exceedingly rare and difficult to get, well, no, you can easily get a medical exemption. You can get a religious exemption. You can get all kinds of exemptions to this policy. Beyond that, it only applies to what is called the core public administration. So to give you an example that everyone can understand, if you work for Finance Canada, the Department of Finance under Minister Chrystia Freeland, well, then this vaccination policy applies to you. If you work for the Canada Revenue Agency, it doesn't apply to you. It's an agency that is technically outside of the government. Same with Parks Canada, Canada Food Inspection Agency, and many others. So there's tens and tens of thousands of employees that this doesn't apply to. Beyond that, you've got, if you're a full-time government employee that this policy does apply to, you don't have to show proof. I mean, if you live in Ottawa, you have to show a vaccine certificate to sit and eat in a local restaurant. Anywhere near Parliament Hill, you've got to show that, in Ontario or Quebec. If you work for the federal government, you just have to sign an attestation that you've been vaccinated. So you could just lie and say, oh yeah, I've been vaccinated, sign the form, send it in. If you're a contractor that works for an employment agency, you have to show proof. And if you're a cleaner that goes into any of these federal buildings, whether the employees are required to be vaccinated or not, you have to be fully vaccinated. So there are exemptions and holes and all of these problems going on. But here's the real kicker, Hal. It doesn't apply to MPs or senators or their staff. They're all exempt. And by the way, most civil servants in Ottawa, where the majority of them reside, are working from home.
Wow. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is set to unveil his new cabinet next Tuesday. Now let's talk about the fact that MPs received a big raise this year will not be returning to the House of Commons until November the 22nd. Why is that?
That's because the Trudeau administration, the Trudeau government, does not like sitting in the House of Commons. There was a piece out the other day that showed that they have been sitting fewer and fewer days, and not just because of COVID. I think prior to COVID, the year prior to COVID, the House of Commons only sat 75 days. This is a pattern with this government that says they don't like the checks and balances that Parliament provides. So yes, we're going to see the cabinet next week, but we won't see them in action until November the 22nd. They'll sit for about 3, maybe 4 weeks. Then they will, according to the current schedule, be gone until January 31st. Now, I'm not one of these people that says an MP is only working if they're in their House of Commons, and if they're not in the House of Commons, then they're on vacation. Any MP that isn't working their riding on a regular basis, showing up at events, solving problems for constituents is not going to get reelected. But we were told that we had to have this election because there were serious problems that needed a serious government, and they needed a mandate, and they needed to get to work. Well, then why are you waiting 2 months? This is the third administration for the Trudeau government. They're not new at it. I looked at the record. In both his second and third terms, Stephen Harper recalled Parliament within a month. He had his cabinet sworn in within 2 weeks and had Parliament back at work within a month. Justin Trudeau's taking 2 months. MPs will have been gone for almost 6 months by the time the House of Commons comes back.
And maybe another discussion someday we can talk about the nice pension that MPs will also receive. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time again today.
Thank you, Hal.
Many people today have common doubts, especially when it comes to what's taking place in society today and where does God fit in all of this. To help make some sense of this is pastor and author Dan Fox. Dan has written a book called Is My Butt Too Big? Butt as in B-U-T, not B-U-T-T. And Dan has been involved in a number of ministries over the years, including youth ministries, various church board positions, and you may have also seen him right here on Miracle Channel. Pastor Dan, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hello, Hal. Thanks for having me.
Now, Pastor Dan, I was looking into the heart of your book, Is My Butt Too Big? And it's not really a weight loss book, but more of a book to rid ourselves of common doubts and finding God's will for our lives?
That's exactly it. That's exactly what it's about. And I find that a lot of people, all of us, we attend church and year after year, and we kind of sometimes can lose our zeal. This is sort of a book to help us shore up the foundation. Even an old foundation can get a few cracks in it, so nothing wrong with doing a little work to shore things up and get our enthusiasm and our excitement back, finding God's purpose and will for us, even in the day-to-day, not necessarily something life-changing, but just maybe you need to pray with somebody at work that's struggling with their marriage or something along those lines, just walking in God's will. That's what the book's really helping to steer us towards. At least that's my desire, my hope for it.
So how important is prayer then in our walk with God?
Prayer is that's that relationship. I mean, Jesus said very clearly, we have to stay connected. He's the vine and we're the branches. And if we're not connected, no matter how good our intentions, we're not getting that grace and that help and that real direction from God on a regular basis. Staying connected is the biggest thing, because then we know we're not just doing something that's good, but we're doing what God's asking us to do. And that's key. If we really want his blessing, his strength, and his best in our lives, is to be doing what he's asked us to do, not necessarily doing everything that needs to be done.
A lot of people would agree saying that communication is key, communication with our spouses, with our kids, with our coworkers, and with our Heavenly Father. And that's what prayer can really offer there. Now, how did you come up with the title, Is My Butt, as in B-U-T, Too Big? What is it all about?
Well, really, I kind of thought it was clever once it kind of came to me, but honestly, it's from chapter 5 in the book. And really, I find that a lot of people, as we hear these scriptures day after day, year after year, when we walk with the Lord, and they become almost cliche, things like, by Jesus' stripes we're healed, or no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And then we'll pray those things in our prayer closet when we're going through a struggle. And yet out of our own mouths, within hours later, someone will ask us how we're doing. I said, yeah, I know the Bible says that by his stripes I'm healed, but it just doesn't seem to be making any difference. It's those buts, but it just doesn't seem to be. And, it might be a financial need. And I know the Bible says he'll meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. But I still seem to struggle. I never have enough money at the end of the month. The bills are always overdue. It's those but statements. They undermine our faith. Faith isn't to be like a light switch turned on and off in our lives. We either believe the word or we don't. So the best thing we can do is we know we believe it. So let's just keep agreeing with it, regardless of what the circumstances say. Agree with what God said and allow him an open door continually to flow his power into our life. Stop switching that power off by allowing our own buts to undermine God's will in our life.
So how often do Christians come to you as well, and I've talked to pastors about this in the past, where we go down on our knees, we pray to our Heavenly Father, we've got concerns, and instead of leaving it at the cross, we stand up and take those problems right back away from God and start stressing out about them?
Oh, that happens so much. I mean, I've been in ministry a lot of years now and involved in a lot of different ways in ministry, from children's ministry all the way through, even seniors. I did men's ministry, did some street youth outreach, and you see people struggle in the same way. And it's that not trusting God over the long haul, or not continually. Although we trust him in our heart, we believe he's God and he loves us, we tend to try to fix things ourselves and pull things back into our own hands, or we lose sight of the fact that Jesus said, all things are possible to him who believes. And we shut off, again, that faith with just those statements of, yeah, but it doesn't seem to be working, or why is it taking so long? Instead of just saying, I know that God is in this, and I know that he's on my side and he's helping me. And together, we're going to see a breakthrough. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I believe God. Continue with that instead of turning that faith off. And really, everybody struggles with that. But this book is just a tool to help us really see that clearly, help our understanding, and get ourselves focused again on doing his will and walking with him.
Now, a number of churches have really struggled during the pandemic. What do you feel is the greatest need in the church today?
Honestly, love and unity, and I guess for each of us to really humbly realize that we're just a small piece of a big picture that God is painting, and not just as an individual, but even as a church. There's a lot of different beliefs out there, a little different doctrinal differences, and really we're not in competition with each other, but we really should be out there just winning the world to Christ and showing them what real love and genuine care and concern for those in our own community is all about. And really that'll draw people back into the church and draw new believers in. Jesus said himself, well, they'll know us by your love, our love for one another. And really we could do better at letting the world see that, instead of little infighting or disagreements or competition with another church. We're not in competition. We just want to see the world one for Christ. And that's what we're all about.
A number of years ago, I was involved in a basketball ministry, bringing a lot of young people in, kind of a side door into the church and leading that, until, of course, they got to be a lot stronger and faster than I was as a basketball player. Then I kind of sat out from the sidelines and I cheered them on after that. But how can we bring young people back into the church? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, there needs to be some passion. Passion is something that I talk about in this book. And really that comes from finding God's will and purpose. If young people are just told, this is how you have to behave and this is what you have to do, instead of encouraged to develop that relationship with God and an ear to his voice, and recognize that God is concerned with their future and every part of it, and has a plan and a purpose for each of them. When youth realize God has a plan and a purpose for their life, and that when they get on their knees alone with him on a daily basis, they can hear from him. And then the passion grows when they realize, my goodness, day to day, not just the big things, but even in the little things, praying for someone at school, a classmate, I can walk in God's will. I can know that God has asked me to do this and do it on a regular basis. Then life becomes exciting and walking with God becomes exciting. But when it's just a list of to-dos and behavioral changes that you have to make on your own, there's nothing too exciting about that.
How can many of us help support so many pastors who've been struggling during the pandemic? I mean, they're human. We're all human here. And many have struggled with things like anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I guess the best thing we can do is just be that encourager, constantly reminding them that they're loved, they're appreciated, and that they don't walk alone. And I mean, for so many of us, the pandemic has really pulled us back out of our church service, and so many feel not as plugged in. And for pastors, seeing so many that they've ministered to for so many years not attending and not sure how they're doing, or I mean, that's a stressful weight on anybody. How would we feel if one or two of our children were out of contact with us for a year or two and we have no idea how they're doing? We're praying for them, believing for them, we raised them, and yet we're not hearing from them. And that's how pastors feel. And it is a hard job. A lot of times those tough things behind the scenes, I don't think many believers appreciate how much they do and what they're doing. And even when they're on their own at home, some may think that they've got it easy. They only work one day a week, but they're on their knees praying for hours. They're in hospitals visiting. They're at people's houses trying to restore marriages that are having difficulties. And there's so much going on behind the scenes. And with a pandemic like this, keeping people out of church, it's even harder, and hard on them to know how to reach people that they're not seeing on a regular basis anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Pastors and the shepherds need their flock. Now, Pastor Dan, what motivated you to write Is My Butt Too Big?
Well, really, I guess, Hal, I felt motivated to write this book. The idea came to me in church, but it came kind of as a nucleus of what direction the book was supposed to take. But really, it was because of the years of struggle I see people going through, where year after year they attend church faithfully, and yet they still struggle in life where they should have success, or they have not necessarily anxiety and some, but almost boredom instead of enthusiasm about the things of God. And God put the book in my heart and told me in no uncertain terms, gave me the name, and said, write this. And it took a long time to write. It's not a very large book. I've been writing a lot since, and I found I can put things together fairly quick. But this one took some time, and it was really trying to get God's heart and have an ear for him and what he wanted to say. And I think it was really because people struggle with sometimes the same thing year after year, and they really shouldn't. And the Lord doesn't want to see that. As believers, we should be progressing, and not just in our faith, but even in our life and our relationships with others around us. We should be progressing, becoming more and more Christ-like, and experience his blessing and his best in our lives. But the years shouldn't go by getting monotonous, but more exciting. And that's really where it came from.
Now, your book opens with a chapter entitled Dare to Dream. Why begin there?
Well, that's a good question, Hal. As children, we all have these great ideas and visions and goals of what we want to do and what we want to become. And I think the school of hard knocks, just life in general, has a way of grinding so much of that out of us. And the book really has to open up and get us to look back at, we can believe for more. Jesus said we need to have faith like a child. Perhaps that's part of why. Because we need to believe again that there can be something significant in our lives. It may not be world-shattering or world-changing, but for an individual that we work with or a neighbor, it might be life-changing for eternity for that individual if we would just hear from God and run and walk with his will. And it's really that opening chapter about believing again, that we can be used of God and that our lives can matter and we can make a difference.
Now, you talked a bit about passion earlier, and passion in your book here. I mean, a passion towards God is vital to help us to grow. But what other areas of our lives should we focus in on when it comes to passion?
Well, really, I think that's the biggest thing that's going to bring that passion is finding that you're doing what God has asked you to do. And that's not necessarily some huge ministry or heading out to the mission field. It could be as simple as somebody that you see on a regular basis that maybe isn't saved. Maybe the Holy Spirit's been asking you, invite them out to that men's breakfast or invite them out to that church service. And yet for some reason, those little things, we seem to be shy or wondering if we should. But when it's the Holy Spirit and you know that he's asking you, you can hear it on the inside. If you just start running with that, say, do it anyway. And don't worry about the outcome, just do what he's asking you to do. That's when your passion starts to grow and increase. It's not like we can make ourselves passionate, but just by finding ourselves doing God's will, we start to see his hand and his power flowing through us to make a difference. And boy, we can get passionate about things then. It gets way more exciting. And it'll start to affect every area of your life. When you see God's will in that area of your life and you start walking in it, boy, it's easy to get excited about life again.
So, Pastor Dan, I'm a viewer at home. I'm watching Bridge City News on Miracle Channel here. What can I hope to gain after reading your book?
Well, really I think some keys, Hal. Just keys that will help us get our thinking right again and get our focus back. And it's easy to lose focus. This world is busy, life is busy, and boy, through this pandemic, it's been a trying time for many people. And just to help us get our roots healthy again, add a little fertilizer to the root system, a little shoring up to the foundation. And really it's just some keys to help us understand where we may be off track a little and what we can do to help us get back into God's will and hearing his voice for ourselves and really running with it. Just some keys to help in our own understanding. I think that's the big thing that this book will give anybody.
So, Pastor Dan, what's the best way of getting hold of a copy of your book, Is My Butt Too Big?
Well, honestly, the fastest way, Amazon. They're amazing. They published the book for me, so you'll get it direct from the printer instead of it coming to me and me sending it to you. Yeah, Amazon you'll find it quick and easy there. And I just ordered one just this week to see how quick it would come. It was 4 days. It was in my mailbox. So they're pretty amazing. But yeah, that's the quickest way.
But what if we want an autographed copy?
Well, then you could contact me at www.schooloffaith.ca and I could arrange that. And no extra charge for sure. But yeah, that's good, Hal.
That's wonderful. Dan Fox is a pastor and author of the book, Is My Butt Too Big? Pastor Dan, thanks for joining us today on Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.